Say your full name.
Isela Blanc. So originally I'm from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. I came to the United States when I was 6.5 years of age. It was my mom, my dad, and my 2 little sisters. At the time I didn't know it, but my mom was pregnant, so she delivered my 4th sister in Umatilla, Oregon. That's where we were for a few short months. My mom and dad were working on the potato fields. Long story short, they left everything behind in Mexico to come to the United States because they wanted their daughters to have access to high quality education.
Do you think that there are things that you have changed overall as a person from being in Mexico?
So when I came to the United States, like I said, I was 6.5. And up until that point, my mom was home with us. So outside of the time that I would go to school in that first year of my schooling, I was with my mom 24/7. She cooked for us. She made our clothes. Every night before we went to bed, we would say our prayers. I knew like the rosary. I knew every prayer in Espanol. And there was a huge change from that. So when we came to the US, suddenly I went from having my mom with us every day to really not seeing her. Because while I was at school in the day, I'd come home in the afternoon, evening, and she would be off to work, her and my dad. So it really changed my life drastically. And it's funny because I was actually talking to my sisters about this, and all the movies with Molly Ringwald, like any of the 80s movies you can think of, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 16 Candles, St. Elmo's Fire, I cannot relate to any of those movies because at the time there was such a cultural disconnect and I don't think I realized it.
Alright, so can you tell me the name of the poem you just read and who it's by?
Okay, so Conciencia de la Mestiza, Gloria Ansaldúa.
And so from the questions that I've asked you thus far and reading that one poem, how can you relate?
Just I was reading it and I was kind of going, yeah. The part that really struck me is the held beliefs of myself as a Mexicana and the messages that I've received continuously growing up in American society. And I think there is a level of complexity and confusion, I'm going to be honest, throughout my life until maybe into my 30s where I started to kind of, I don't know, figure it out, if that makes sense. And I'm still figuring it out.
Did you read anything written by just anything like this when you were growing up? That brought your attention to this, or what would you read growing up?
Dude, you're making me cry.
I'm sorry.
No. I was never exposed to anything like this growing up. And I think that's part of the complexities, which is the reason I'm getting a little emotional, because I'm catching up. It's stuff that I've been exposing myself to more so now and have had like a level of awareness that I didn't have before. So it makes me really sad because when I go into classrooms where there's a lot of kids that look like me that are first generation immigrants or first generation Americans, they're going through this right now. Anyway, it's really sad.
So do you think that if you would have read something similar to this growing up, that it would have changed your perspective on who you were as a person and just your struggles that you went through being a trans-border Latina?
I have never really felt like I have belonged. And I have to fight for my space.
Yeah.
And then I have to behave. So I'm learning to be a model minority.
Okay.
So I've lived in Tempe for over 20 years and I am a minority, but I've had to behave as a model minority. Incredibly respectful, thoughtful. So it's skills that are helping me now. But now I have a different level of awareness. Anyway.
And then growing up, When you came to the United States, were you pressured to be attracted to certain people based on certain things?
So there was definitely pressure. I remember, so I started dating my husband when I was almost 16, and we'd been dating maybe a year or two, and my uncles were annoyed that I was dating a white guy.
And why was that?
I can't tell you. I always thought they were hypocrites because they were with white women, but they didn't want me, their niece, to date a white guy. They wanted me to be with a Latino man. So I always thought it was really hypocritical of them. And then they expected me to like literally get married and start having children at the age of like 18 or earlier. And so there was always pressure, not from my mom and dad, but pressure from my mom's family to get married, to start bearing children. In fact, this is a really fun story. So my sisters and I all went to college, and we were living at home because we couldn't afford to live on campus. And there was a point where my uncles told my mom, "Éjole, esas niñas solamente viven contigo para no crecer porque no quieren trabajar." So their idea was we were only going to school and living with them because we didn't want to grow up and we didn't want to get real jobs.
What's your job? What do you do?
I got elected into the Arizona State Legislature last year in 2016, so I am a state representative.
All right, can you tell me the name of the poem and the author that you just read?
Both Sides of the Border, Kathy Ruiz.
All right, and can you tell me kind of what it talks about?
So it just kind of talks about how there's a disconnect when you are and identify as many things other than one culture.
And do you see how it like either intersects or maybe clashes with like your ideologies that you were growing up with?
So I was saying that this is probably more of your experience, being a child of a Mexican mom who has, since you were little, identified as 100% Mexicana, and then a white dad. But it took a while to get there, right? Because there was a lot of denial. Because on my dad's side of the family, my grandmother was first generation Mexican because she came from Europe. Her mother came from Europe. But on my mom's side of the family, I couldn't tell you how many generations in we were. And on my dad's side, typical white European land-owning hacienda people, and my mom were more of like the indigenous, but I couldn't tell you of what or what kind. So on my dad's side, blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin. Anyway.
Yeah. And so do you see where, I mean, the cultures clash and collide and how it's different from your experience to maybe, like you said, mine?
So where mine is different is what I stated earlier. Even though I'm from Mexico and was born there, I'm still not Mexican enough to be Mexican. But I am a U.S. citizen, and I'm still not American enough to be American.
Okay, and why did you tell us when we were younger to identify with our Latin roots?
Because the reality, because of many experiences throughout my lifetime and as you guys were growing up, is the minute you walk into a room, the first thing people see is the color of your skin.
Yes.
And also because I grew up with so much shame around being Mexican, I did not want you guys to be ashamed of who you are and who I am and where I come from.